Well, hello, folks. After a decade away, it is the Washington Eagle back with you again here on YouTube. The Washington Eagle, a channel on YouTube where we will discuss factors in aviation that are sometimes taboo to talk about, expose situations that are going on to the light of truth, and also cover some ground that isn't ordinarily covered in your ordinary public aviation discourse. Let's get started here. My first video after 10 years away is going to be about my experience and review of a website called Aviation Interviews. And for anybody that's a little bit more advanced in their aviation career, they have no doubt come across this website. The website is essentially an online community where you can join. I've joined for $39.99 for every 30 days. As part of that community, when I go to an interview, I am allowed to prepare for that interview with lots of questions that people have left behind. I'm part of the Platinum plan here, and I can at any one given time during a month be signed up for 5 different gouges and questions and answers and reviews of 5 airlines. There's also a bronze package for one company at a time, but I'm in the platinum package. Here's a really good idea of like how the questions look that people bring back with them from the interviews. And people are encouraged not only to give the questions that they were asked, but give the answers. Now, the answers are not reviewed generally by a panel. They are just cleared by the website administration and put up here. So whether the question is what the panelists are looking for, or whether the answer is what they're looking for, you don't know or not. It could be the world's dumbest answer, and as long as it cleared their review, their one person that reviews these questions, it'll be on there. It could be the most intelligent answer that anybody's ever given the panelists, but you don't know. So you have to use a grain of salt and go over these by yourself and go, is that something I would say or not? So there really isn't any good professional guidance on these answers. They are ranked or scored by here. The number of times with this one was asked apparently 4 different times, and here the answer is given twice. It's like, so this appears to be a somewhat popular answer with 2 people having answered it the same way. So I really love the premise. The premise of this website is great. Now here's a really good example of a review that was left. You are encouraged to fill out this form where it asks for the date of your interview, your total flight time, pilot and command time, turbine, pilot and command time, just generally what your level of experience is. Have you been a flight instructor, a multi-engine instructor? Do you have your ATP? Have you ever been a flight engineer? And then down here it asks for the nitty gritty, were you hired, yes or no? And then also here, how long after you sent in your resume were you called? Here this person was 24 weeks. How many letters of recommendation did you bring? It gives a really comprehensive look at not only what the questions and answers, possible answers could be during your interview, but also who got the job, what qualifications they had, etc. So ultimately, I did go to this one interview, which I found to be a little, well, it wasn't even close to how people coming from the interview and leaving their gouges said it would be. I kicked off my review, which I submitted to Aviation Interviews, with the news that of the 6 questions that I was asked during my panel interview, only 3 of them had already been mentioned in the question bank here on Aviation Interviews. I was broadsided by 3 out of the 6 questions that I was given. Now the question is every question you're supposed to be on here? No, but for half of them not to be on here, that's exceptional, because I had listed that in my review or my gouge, which I'll tell you what happened to that a little bit later on. So I'd said that, well, half my questions were not listed here on the Aviation Interviews Q&A section, and then I also answered that although everybody coming from this interview had news like, oh, everything was really laid back. It was a great experience. The interview was exactly as described here on Aviation Interviews. Well, my interview was anything but. My interview was actually quite hostile. Whenever I would give an answer, as my professional interview prepping company told me, oh, that's a good answer. We like that. That's really exceptional. Well, no, it didn't end there. The captain would always redirect and cross-examine and ask me, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? And here I had professional aviation preppers helping me craft my answers. So I know they were not crappy answers. They were good answers. I just got a guy that thought that he needed to create a hostile interview environment. But if you go through these reviews one at a time, here overall, it's very easy, and I mean, you just, it's very easy to pluck these like words of assurance, out of these reviews or gouges. Everyone was very nice and professionals. All questions were from the gouge on this website. No curveballs. Oh ha! 3 of my 6 questions I'd never heard before. So I had said that in my review, and I had also said that I had a hostile experience with my interview, and I said, I believe they interview people differently based upon what you bring to them on your application. And I think that that's fair to say and a very safe assumption. They're going to interview a B-52 pilot who just spent 15 years in the Air Force differently than a regional first officer that flunked his way to the interview. But right now, airlines are so desperate for pilots that they will interview almost anyone. So I expressed that in my email, my review to airline interviews. And what I got back then was this: Washington Eagle, thank you for your email. I actually reviewed your AA gouge earlier today and rejected it myself. It doesn't add any value for other pilots, really. Telling pilots that they could expect a rather hostile interview doesn't add anything for any other pilots. Wait a few days and think it over. Maybe you would like to send in another gouge. If not, I wish you luck on your job search. What, another gouge that has perhaps like more iterations of the words laid back, or more iterations of the phrase, everything was as expected, it was exactly like the gouge. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to leave that kind of review because that's not what happened. Whereas I appreciate the aviation interviews concept and theory, they are doing a disservice to pilots, dispatchers, and flight attendants when all they ever post are positive reviews of what to experience. This could actually set you up, as it did me, for essentially walking into a clothesline and getting broadsided by questions and attitudes that you weren't expecting. I'm sure that everybody would agree. Don't rely on one particular source from the internet, like one website or even one interview prepper, to prepare you for what could be the most important interview of your life. Get your information and knowledge from a broad spectrum of sources. Now, that being said, Aviation Interviews needs to review their policy, and I'm saying that kindly, on publishing reviews just based on, well, this one makes us look real good, and it makes the company that they interviewed with look real good. If this is a true review website and one where you have the best chance of preparing yourself for an interview, regardless of what your experience is, then they need to publish every review that's left, as long as it's not filled with derogatory, racist, sexist, or any kind of information like that. My interview was cogent, to the point, and didn't paint, sadly, the airline panelists as being the most friendly panelists, and it also didn't paint Aviation Interviews as being a complete compendium of information, which I'm sure, like I've said before, even they would acknowledge. My advice to you, Aviation Interviews, is if you want to be seen as a complete website for one corner of preparing yourself for an aviation interview, your level of honesty needs to be brought up 1 or 2 notches higher. Stop blocking people's reviews from being published that might not paint you or the airline that they've come from in the most glowing light.